Have you ever imagined what could happen in a psychiatric hospital during a stormy night? I was there on the last night that Blackwood Hospital was in operation, and what I witnessed was much more sinister and disturbing than any insane mind could ever conceive. My name is Evelyn, and I am a 25-year-old nurse. I worked for 3 years at Blackwood Psychiatric Hospital, a place known not only for its treatment methods, but also for the sinister stories that circulated among the staff. It was a large and imposing hospital, but today it is completely abandoned. Its walls are covered with moss and cracks, the windows are broken, and the doors hang on rusty hinges. Walking through the corridors now is like traversing a labyrinth of shadows and forgotten memories. Blackwood Hospital was founded at the beginning of the 20th century and, over the years, gained the reputation of being one of the best psychiatric centres in the country. However, its history is marked by dark events. During the day, the hospital seemed like a safe place, where you could hear the laughter of the calmer patients and the conversations of the doctors in the corridors. But at night, everything changed. The silence and empty corridors increased the feeling of isolation. The atmosphere became heavy like a horror movie, and any small noise echoed through the corridors, making the environment even more sinister. On the last night the hospital was in operation, I was on duty. It was a stormy night and the wind howled like a wild animal, beating against the windows and making the lights flicker. Few staff were present due to the severe weather, and this only increased the sense of isolation and vulnerability. The atmosphere was tense, and there was a feeling in the air that something bad was about to happen. The storm that night was one of the worst I have ever seen. Lightning lit up the dark sky, and the sound of thunder made the hospital walls tremble. The corridors were almost deserted, and the few staff present hurried to finish their tasks and retreat to their designated areas. That night, the doctor on duty at the hospital was Dr. Michael. He was 32 years old and highly respected in the hospital. Michael was known for his dedication to patients and his calm demeanour. I admired him greatly, both for his professional skill and his personality. That night, I was on my shift in the ward of the most severe patients, where the most difficult cases were treated. The weather conditions made communication with the outside world difficult, and the sense of isolation began to make me uncomfortable. Nothing I hadn't experienced before, but that night was different. The storm caused a series of technical problems such as small power clicks and failures in the internal communication system. All this contributed to the feeling of strangeness and being in a place out of reach of the outside world. The beginning of the night was relatively calm, despite the storm outside. Michael and I were casually talking about the day, about the patients, and about our plans for the future. He had a way of making any situation seem less frightening, and I felt safe around him. He mentioned that he was thinking about starting a new research project on alternative treatments for psychiatric disorders, and that maybe I could help him, which made me happy, as it would be a great way to advance my career. But this tranquility did not last long. As the night progressed, strange events began to occur. It started with small noises different from the usual. In a place like this, you hear strange sounds all the time, whether from the patients or the structure. But this time it was something more abnormal which bothered me, a feeling of discomfort. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just my imagination influenced by the storm and the environment. But it didn't take long for things to get more intense. I was in the corridor of the ward of the most severe patients, checking the charts and adjusting the medications, when I noticed a familiar figure in the distance. It was Michael, or at least someone who looked a lot like him. He was standing at the end of the corridor with his back to me, acting strangely. His movements were slow and uncoordinated, which I found very strange because he shouldn't be there. I called his name, but he didn't respond. My heart started to race. Something was very strange. I decided to approach, feeling a chill down my spine with every step. When I got closer, The Michael slowly turned around. It was definitely him, but his eyes were empty, lifeless, and a sinister smile distorted his face. It was like looking at a sinister version of Dr. Michael. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. I took a few steps back. A loud thunder rumbled the corridor walls. The light flickered, and when it came back, he had simply disappeared from in front of me. I ran back to the infirmary, my heart pounding like a drum. When I entered, there was Michael, the real Michael, calmly reviewing some charts. My fear turned to confusion. I knew I had seen someone, something that looked like him, but how was that possible? "Michael, I just saw you in the corridor, but it wasn't you," I said. My voice was tearful, and fear had taken over my body with a feeling that went from my stomach to my neck. He looked up, concerned, and came over to me. "Evelyn, are you okay? I haven't left here since you went to see the patients," he said, touching my shoulder reassuringly. But that only increased my confusion. Was I starting to lose my sanity? If it wasn't him, who was it? That night was turning into a real nightmare. The following hours were a torment of uncertainties and growing fear. After seeing that strange being that looked like Michael, my mind was in a whirlwind of thoughts. "Evelyn, are you sure about what you saw?" he asked, trying to be understanding, but I noticed the doubt in his voice. "It could have been the reflection of the light, or maybe you're tired. This place has a way of messing with our heads, especially on nights like this." "Michael, I know what I saw," I insisted, my voice trembling slightly. "It was you, or something that looked a lot like you, but distorted, wrong." He sighed and ran his hand through his hair, clearly struggling to find a logical explanation. "Maybe it's the stress, Evelyn. This storm, the patients, all of this could be affecting your perception." Then an idea occurred to me. "Let's check the security cameras," I suggested, trying to control my fear. "If there's something wrong here, maybe the cameras have captured it." Michael hesitated for a moment, but eventually agreed. "All right, if it will make you feel better, let's go check the security cameras." We went to the surveillance room, a small space filled with monitors showing images of the hospital corridors. Normally, the security guard who monitored the cameras would be there, but today the chair was empty. I found it strange, but Michael reminded me that the guard who was supposed to cover the shift simply didn't show up for work, and the one who was there before had left because his shift had ended, and the storm was very severe. The wind outside howled like a hungry wolf, and the sound of the storm seemed amplified in the silence of the room. We sat in front of the monitors and started reviewing the recordings. At first, everything seemed normal. The empty corridors, the closed doors. But then, there they were. Our own distorted figures. They were us, but how could they be us if we were right here watching the recordings and looking at the monitors? On the monitor, we saw the distorted figures of ourselves walking through the corridors. Michael's doppelganger moved with a strange slowness, his movements robotic and unnatural. The distorted version of myself looked like a macabre shadow, walking in a hunched and strange manner. The moment I saw that, my body shivered completely. Something strange consumed me. A feeling of fear, extreme dread. That scene left me in shock. I really had no idea what was happening. Michael and I looked at each other, and I could see the perplexity in his eyes. It was clear that he also had no idea what was happening, or how it could be real. "That's impossible," Michael murmured, the fear evident in his voice. "How can there be copies of us?" I didn't know what to answer. My eyes were fixed on the screen, my heart beating uncontrollably. Every time our doppelgangers passed by a camera, I felt a chill down my spine. "We need to protect ourselves," said Michael, finally moving away from the monitors. Michael picked up the phone to try to call for help and talk to the reception staff. But strangely, the hospital seemed completely empty. The few staff who were supposed to be with us in the building didn't appear on any of the cameras. The phone was completely silent. It seemed we were completely isolated in that place. Just us, the patients, and our macabre versions. Realizing that the phones were not working, he suggested we leave the monitoring room and find a safe place. He also suggested we close or block all the doors we passed. That way, we could be a little safer. I agreed, even though the terror was paralyzing me inside. We left the surveillance room and started our desperate attempt to stay safe. We locked every door we found, pushing furniture to block the entrances. The sound of metal creaking and wood scraping on the floor echoed through the corridors, amplifying the sense of despair. As we worked, our dialogues became a reflection of our mental state. "Evelyn, do you think this is real? Or are we losing our sanity?" Michael asked, his voice laden with anguish, his gaze lost and frightened. "I don't know, Michael. Nothing makes sense, but we have to stay together and find a way out of here," I replied, trying to stay calm but feeling the panic growing inside me, my hands trembling slightly. The environment around us became increasingly claustrophobic. The walls seemed to close in on us. The endless corridors turned into labyrinths with no exit. Every sound, every shadow seemed to hide an imminent threat. The hospital, which was once just a workplace, was now a tangible nightmare, a prison of fear and uncertainty. We had locked almost all the doors, blocked the main corridors, but the feeling of security was illusory. We knew those things were out there, imitating us in a bizarre and sinister way. We weren't sure what their intentions were. Were they there to kill us? The distorted figures of our doppelgangers were close, their footsteps echoing through the silent corridors. Michael and I hid in a small storage room, our hearts beating uncontrollably. We could hear each other's breathing, heavy and fast, as the footsteps approached. "Michael, what are we going to do?" I whispered, the fear evident in my voice. "I don't know, Evelyn, but we can't let them find us. We have to stay quiet," he replied, his tone determined, but I could see the terror in his eyes. The storage room was small and stuffy. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity. The sound of the footsteps grew louder, and for a moment I thought they were going to find us. I closed my eyes, trying to control my breathing and fear. I felt the sweat running down my face, my hands trembling. Then the footsteps receded, leaving us in oppressive silence. Michael let out a sigh of relief, and I tried to do the same, but the feeling of danger didn't disappear. We knew that this was just the beginning. The doppelgangers were hunting us, and the night was far from over. We were trying to stay calm in the storage room, but the feeling of danger was overwhelming. The sound of the footsteps had receded, but we knew we weren't safe. Michael suggested we should move to find an exit before they returned. I agreed, my heart still racing. We left the room, trying to make as little noise as possible. The corridors seemed darker and more sinister than ever, and strangely we no longer heard any sounds from the patients. Suddenly, a metallic sound of something falling made us freeze in place. Our doppelgangers were close. Before we could react, they found us. The distorted versions of ourselves emerged from the shadows, their empty eyes fixed on us. Michael's doppelganger moved first, his movements quick and unpredictable. Michael tried to defend himself, but he was caught off guard. His distorted version held a blade in his hand and with a quick motion and a macabre smile wounded Michael. The fight that followed was intense. The sound of blows echoed through the corridors, mixed with screams of pain and despair. The situation was terrifying. I saw Michael's doppelganger attacking him with inhuman strength, his face expressionless. Michael tried to fight back, but he had no chance. "Michael!" I screamed, trying to reach him, but I was pulled by my hair by my own doppelganger. Its hands were as cold as ice, its empty eyes staring at me with malevolence. I watched helplessly as Michael was attacked by his own distorted version. Michael's final scream echoed through the hospital, a memory I will never erase from my mind. With Michael dead, I knew I had to escape. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I fought to break free. I managed to get loose and ran down the corridor, the sound of the doppelganger's footsteps right behind me. Every door I passed was locked. Every corridor seemed like a dead end. Finally, I found an unlocked door that led to an equipment room. I quickly entered and locked the door behind me, panting. My heart was racing, and tears streamed down my face. I looked around the room, trying to find something I could use to defend myself. That's when I saw an old recorder on a dusty shelf. I grabbed it with trembling hands and began to record everything that was happening. If I couldn't get out alive, at least someone would find the recorder and know the truth. My name is Evelyn. I'm trapped in Blackwood Psychiatric Hospital. Michael is dead. They found us. The doppelgangers. They are real and they are hunting us. Please, if anyone finds this, know that we are not crazy. They are real. I kept talking, trying to keep my mind occupied as I heard the footsteps getting closer. The equipment room was small, and I knew I couldn't hide for long. The panic was almost unbearable. Finally, the door started to open. I curled up in the corner, holding the recorder like it was a talisman. The distorted figure of myself entered, its grotesque smile widening as it approached. I knew there was no escape. This was my end. The figure advanced slowly, savoring every moment of my terror. Its cold hand grabbed my arm, and I felt intense pain as its sharp nails dug into my skin. I screamed, but the sound was muffled by the hand that covered my mouth. I was trapped, helpless in front of my own macabre reflection. The following moments were a blur of pain and horror. I felt every blow, every cut, as if my own body was being torn apart. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was the figure leaning over me, a malicious smile on its face.
The next morning, the staff who arrived for work found a scene of complete chaos in the hospital. No staff or patients were alive. Something terrible had happened during the night. The environment was disordered, with clear signs of a disturbing and violent event. The hospital was in a state of total disarray. An unsettling silence and a horrible smell filled the air, while walls and corridors were painted red with clear signs that something bad had happened. The police were called immediately, and the investigation began. The detectives reviewed hours of footage from the security cameras, trying to understand what had happened on that fateful night. The images showed scenes of turmoil and disorder, but something more disturbing was evident. In the recordings, it appeared that Evelyn and Dr. Michael were involved in the violent events. They were seen in aggressive and unusual behaviors, their faces expressing inexplicable fury. In the end, the cameras showed Michael and Evelyn in their final moments, which left everyone perplexed. The evidence suggested that Evelyn and Michael had caused the chaos in the hospital. The investigators were perplexed. There was no apparent reason for the two, known for being competent professionals and kind people, to have acted that way. But the images didn't lie. With the case closed, Blackwood Hospital was permanently shut down and sealed. The rumors about the events of that night began to spread, and the story of Blackwood Psychiatric Hospital became an urban legend. The building fell into ruins, covered by vegetation and left abandoned. Today, it is a place avoided by everyone, a place where they say evil still resides. But the truth remains shrouded in mystery. There was something in the footage that the investigators couldn't explain. Small lapses, like cuts, distortions, and shadows in the images that suggested that maybe, just maybe, the doppelgangers were real. Some believe that Evelyn and Michael went insane due to the isolation and stress of that night. Others, however, are not so sure. The accounts of Evelyn's last moments, recorded on the recorder found in the equipment room, tell a different story. A story of distorted and evil beings that took their forms and drove them to madness. Those watching the footage couldn't help but feel a chill when they heard Evelyn's desperate voice, begging for whoever found the recorder to believe the truth she was trying to tell. Today, many who pass by the old Blackwood Hospital swear they hear whispers and see shadows moving in the broken windows. Could the doppelgangers still be there, trapped in an eternal cycle of terror? Or was the terror of that night simply the result of disturbed minds that succumbed to despair and madness? The question remains, What really happened on the last night of Blackwood Psychiatric Hospital's operation? Were the doppelgangers real, or was it all the result of Evelyn and Michael's disturbed minds? Hello, I'm the Traveler. If you've made it this far, it means you enjoyed the content. So please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to encourage me to keep creating more for you.